Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today, the retro game I want to look at is Super Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, I really love the Mario Kart franchise. I've played almost every single game. I somehow never got the 3DS one for some reason, but every single other one I have at least played a little bit. And this one was one I replayed fairly recently within the last couple of years when I got my Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition and played through a bunch of the old games on there, and I decided I was going to do everything I could in Super Mario Kart just to see the origination of the Mario Kart franchise. I had played the original one on the Super Nintendo when I was a little kid, but it had been a long time, so I didn't remember a whole lot about it. So I wanted to see how the series started off. So first and foremost, this game launched in 1992 in Japan and North America, and a year later in Europe. It sold close to 9 million units and is the fourth best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time. So this did very, very well, not only commercially, but also critically. It's ranked as a really high-ranking game in the lists of all-time greats. It's a really great game, but in comparison to the rest of the franchise, it's definitely a great entry point for the series, but definitely not the most fun to revisit. Now, if you look at this game on the Super Nintendo, it's actually really fantastic looking. It looks very good, the way that they've done all the sprite work and everything. It looks fantastic, and it plays very, very well. It's not the most tight in terms of racing games, and again, I'll try not to compare this to like the series and later entries, because of course it's going to improve over time, but if you compare it to stuff like F-Zero, it doesn't race quite as well as those other ones on the Super Nintendo. There are games that control a little bit better in that racing or the kart racing genre as it is. But it does play pretty darn well. I played through the entirety of the game. You have 50cc, you have 100cc, and 150cc. You also have time trials, and you have the multiplayer modes it's all a pretty good package. The multiplayer, of course, since it's on the Super Nintendo, only plays with 2 people, in regards to like the 4-player modes that you can do in the later entries, but 2-player battle is actually a whole lot of fun. So you have the battle mode, you have the just racing against each other modes, you have 4 cups, all 5 tracks apiece. Later games went down to 4 tracks per cup. This one had 5, so you have a total of 20 tracks altogether. It's a pretty good package for how big this game was when it started off. Starting off a kart racer like this and kind of kickstarting the kart racing genre in general with 20 whole tracks is pretty substantial, I would say. And they have some pretty iconic ones as well that have made it into later entries, even into some of the DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. There are some really good tracks. There are also some really bad tracks as well, as to be expected. My biggest gripe with this game after playing it some more recently is that the driving itself is kind of clunky. Trying to utilize like skids and such and hitting items and hitting the coin pads and everything just doesn't feel quite right to me. It's really hard to get the racing down. Once you get a handle on it, it's fine, but I still found myself messing up when I normally do this exact same thing and have a different result. It felt like I was getting the hang of everything, the skidding was fine, and then suddenly I'd just veer off the track for no good reason. I just felt like it just didn't register my skid the right way, something like that. It just doesn't feel the best to control. But racing-wise, this looks really fantastic for being on the Super Nintendo, and it's fun to race against the CPUs. I think the CPUs were actually programmed fairly well, again, especially for a first try at the kart racing subgenre that they're creating here. I think they did a pretty good job of balancing everything. The items are fun to use. I like the unique item pads instead of having the item boxes that came later on. I think the item pads is a really interesting idea. I like how they introduced the coin mechanic at the very beginning, and it works pretty well overall. Again, this isn't the most fun. This is going to be a shorter review because there's not a whole lot to do in this game outside of just the 4 cups that you can do, 5 tracks apiece, like I said previously, if you're not playing multiplayer modes with your friends. And that's usually where the Mario Kart games shine. I did play several matches with my buddies, playing on the multiplayer mode to see how fun it would be, and it's okay. It's just fine. I think it's a great introduction to the series, but I think they did everything much better moving forward. Super Mario Kart is a really great piece of history. It was really important for the Mario Kart series. Obviously, this was the start of it, and they really made use of the hardware in the best way possible. I think there are better racers on the Super Nintendo, and I think the later entries really make this one look kind of dull in comparison. But again, this one was a good starting point, and I'm glad that they were able to improve on it going forward, especially with the 3D graphics, and that they didn't falter going into the 3D realm. I'm going to give Super Mario Kart a silver rank, just because once you've played it through one time, there's not much else you're going to do unless you have a buddy that you want to play with. But typically you're not going to on like the old Super Nintendo. So this is going to be a silver rank. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.